Welcome to Drinking on the Edge, a podcast and streamcast with David Fuhrer. I'm your host. I'm a veteran of the adult beverage world for 31 years now, maybe longer if you count part-time jobs just bopping around Northern California. Well, since that time, 1986, I've performed many roles in this alcohol beverage industry, aka adult beverages, and both here in my native U.S., and also a dozen of those years spent in Europe, working in England and Germany. But my time has had me doing a wide range of things. Thank you for your indulgence to hear about them just a little bit. And sure, just like a whole lot of other folks, I ended up working in shops and restaurants in varying ways, in service and in management and on the production side as well. However, my second role, after working in the natural foods world as a young man, before it was a profitable enterprise to be in, I drifted off into this world of wines, spirits, and beers because, well, I am a hedonist at heart, and long before I became an adult, and so I followed that instinctively and intellectually. So after my time spent in working in various shops in different parts of the U.S. And in England, I ended up working doing writing for wine magazines, appealing to the general public, and beer magazines as well. And I wrote for a Chicago, just fun magazine called Barfly. The name says it all. During that period in the 90s, I also taught continuous wine classes at the University of Chicago, my dad's alma mater, making him very proud, even though I never had a day in class there. But I made many friends from there, some who wanted bigger, better things with doctorates and all that. So those were consumer classes. I also ended up training later on after passing the advanced level of the Court of Master Sommeliers exams. I ended up teaching sommeliers as well as writing for them, both here in the States and in London when I lived there too. So that's a lot about me. Over the episodes that we're going to be having, I'll be sharing a lot more interesting things about others whom I've met and shared time with, some names you'll recognize who are famous not only in the world of wine, but in other forms such as in entertainment. And today, well, we're going to be covering a bit of a range, and we will try to do that in all of these episodes. There's not likely to be an episode that's solely dedicated to IPAs or port wines. We're going to have a little bit of everything in each episode so that nobody is left wanting at some point. So if you're not a beer person, you'll have something about wine. If you're not someone who likes whiskey, well, there'll be something about beer, and so on and so forth. And we're actually going to go pretty far out, too, because after doing this as long as I have, I'm constantly searching and exploring for new tastes, new smells, and new information. And so I'm even keen to write about and research ciders, Japanese rice beverages, sakes, shochus, and the like. So you'll be hearing about some very unusual things as well as some very common things. And today, our beer category is going to be one that is admittedly very unusual, but a category that has set a stage for a trend here in the United States of a style of beer that people thought may have been something that was native to the U.S., the sour beer style. Well, indeed, no, it is something that really originated in Belgium. And we're going to dive into that category first of all, but we're also going to, with wine, talk about sparkling wines. And no, not champagne. Got nothing against it, but next to France, where champagne is from, we got Spain, and Spain's native bubbly is Cava. We'll be talking about that and tasting a few good ones as well. And finally, on the spirits side, we're going to go into crazy category again from a near neighbor of Mexico. But no, not tequila, not even mezcal. We're going to try something called sotol. And for the beer and spirit parts of it, I'm going to be joined by a couple of our regulars here at the Epicurean, where this is all occurring in Rhinecliff. But first of all, let's go into beer. So excuse me while I pull my file up here. I can refer to things that I've written and repeat them just because, hey, I created it. I can repeat what I've written. So we're going to talk about a beer style called Gueuze or Gueuze. And let's hear what Google Translate pronounced it. The correct Dutch pronunciation is? Gueuze. One more time. Gueuze. Yeah, it's that sheep-sounding Dutch, not the hard German style of G. In English, it would be?
Gueuze.
Yep, that's it, Gueuze. So we'll refer to it as Gueuze today. It's just that much easier on our American tongues. So what this is Gueuze comes from Belgium, as I mentioned. It originates from the Seine Valley. That's S-E-N-N-E for those of you who are curious. And this valley is just outside of Brussels. And Gueuze is a style of lambic beer. Now, Gueuze is the foundation of the lambic style. So basically, some of you may be familiar with the fruit-flavored beers coming out of Belgium. Those are lambic beers. However, the foundation of those beers is Gueuze. So basically, Gueuze is the starting point. You add fruit, whole fruit, or syrups. It becomes a lambic. All right. So it is the original sour beer, Gueuze is. And it's made by blending young, about 1-year-old versions. Yeah, it ages. With older ones of 2 to 3 years. And these are then bottled for a second fermentation. So basically, the first-year-old versions haven't fully fermented. The older ones have finished their fermentation. That is, all those sugars have been eaten up by the yeasts. And, of course, all fermentation is pretty basic stuff. Yeast and fermentable sugars create 3 things: carbon dioxide, alcohol, and heat. Heat is not very desirable. It's just there to help move everything along. It's the alcohol and carbon dioxide that we're looking at here that we want to maintain in the beer. So here we have this young version, which is not fully fermented, and these older ones, which are fully fermented. Blending them together, you stimulate a second fermentation in the bottle. So this is what helps to finalize the Gueuze or lambic beers. So because aged hops are used exclusively in the production of these styles of beers, Gueuze has little to none of the traditional hop flavor and aroma that can be found in most other styles of beer, due to the aging process, which strips the hops of their characteristic flavors and aromas, right? So hops are very delicate creatures. They smell a certain way and they have a certain amount of taste, but if you leave them to come in contact with oxygen slowly, these things will dissipate. That's the process of oxygenation, denuding everything that's carbon-based. And so the wild yeasts that are specific to these lambic-style beers give Gueuze a dry, cider-like, musty, sour, sometimes yogurty taste. And so using as a point of reference, how does this happen? Well, the breweries in the Seine Valley have these vast vats where the beer is sitting, whether fermented or unfermented, and they're wide vats with portals or doors at the top. As well, the buildings themselves have vast openings on the roof, typically, sometimes on the side, but more often on the roof. And these are kept, these are cold, unrefrigerated rooms. And so they're purposely maintained a cold atmosphere so that you don't have the fermentation involved. However, come spring, and all the flowers are blooming, and there's many pollens and yeasts and animals in the air, these doors and roofs are thrown open in these breweries, along with the vats being open, to allow these yeasts, these native yeasts, to fall into the vats, thereby stimulating fermentation in that context as well. So that's why you don't have a controlled fermentation like you do in many cases with making beer. You've got a wild fermentation. Because of that, it encourages the growth of strains of yeasts called Brettanomyces. These create that sort of funky, barnyard, sour character that is characteristic of Gueuze beers. And lastly, as I open this bottle, Gueuze is traditionally served in champagne-style bottles that are cork finished, and they are either in 375 or a full 750 milliliters of volume. And there goes one. Now, this one in particular comes from the Timmerman's brewery, and I'll allow Matt here to pour himself a little bit. And Matt, when you've done that, if you can call in Mike to join us. Thank you. So the Timmerman's brewery is the oldest brewery of this type. It's the oldest Gueuze brewery, and it dates to 1702. Quite a time away. And they have probably the largest production volume of these lambic beers. They're pretty easily found throughout the world. And the aroma here is, well, I would pour a little bit for our friend Mike, who's just joined us from the Epicurean. And so just so he knows, everybody knows here, the alcohol level here is 6.7, and it's a spontaneous fermentation, meaning there's no yeast inoculated. It's all wild fermentation. I'm just going up. So I'm just looking at the bottle. I'm going off the website says 6.7. The bottle says 5.5, which is much more normal. What makes this interesting, Mike, is this particular beer, and you can see right there on the label, it says...
bottled in 2015, brewed in 2012. Wow, so it is bottle conditioned for 3 years.
Indeed, and it was brewed almost a decade. It could be a decade ago now. It's 2022. Look at that.
Oh yeah, fantastic! I can't wait to take a taste.
Well, me too. With that said, this is probably about the 15th bottle I've had of this. I managed to grab a bunch across the river in Kingston from a place that was dumping it for a ridiculously low price. And I said if I found this in Europe, they would be charging about 15, 20 times the price I paid for it. So cheers, gentlemen. Cheers,
gentlemen. All right, let's give it a taste.
So I'm not gonna comment on the flavor or smells. I'm gonna allow my fellow guests here to comment about this.
All right. Well, I'm into the flavors, right? So let's see what we're drinking here.
So on the Timmerman's website, it does tell you that the conservation capacity is 20 years. I don't doubt it. This is only a decade old. It doesn't taste wrong. It tastes weird, in my opinion. It's sour, but it's not crazy complex. It's pretty straight ahead. It doesn't make my mouth hurt. It's sour and refreshing. Kind of a medium density, not particularly light, not particularly heavy.
I would agree with all of that, right?
Okay,
I mean,
cool.
I think that the thing that strikes me about this particular bottle, right, is like given its age, right, it does not have much funk. It is very like lively, and it has nice acidity, and it does have like a couple of like very obvious bold citrus notes, right? And I think, just given the fact that we're drinking like a 10-year-old bottle of beer, like that to me is surprising, right? Like, and I think that there's a lot of, natural wine production today, right? Just like a lot of natural alcohol production that really prides itself on the barnyard funk, right? And like taking a roll in the hay. And, this has none of that, right? It feels like and tastes incredibly fresh.
Well, reflective of Timmerman's, they do happen to be owned by one of the largest, if not the largest, brewery in the world. I am pretty sure they are owned by InBev, the same people who own Anheuser-Busch and all that. I could be wrong about that, but my check today, I couldn't find anything definitive.
Oh wow, that's like
So the Timmerman's style, even for their straight fruit lambic beers, more commercial of a style than some of the more renowned names in Belgian lambics. Even so, I wouldn't call this anything near normal, but in the world of Gueuze beers, this is probably the most easily understood, most easily palatable style.
And let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What is the cost per bottle of this finely crafted beer?
Well, this 750 milliliter bottle of beer, I bought these several 6-pack boxes of these across the river. I think I paid something like
per bottle cost. Break it down to me on the.
Honestly, it was ridiculous. It was like $6 a bottle.
What?
And right, if you were to find this, it could somewhere between 6 and 10. And if you were to find this, if you could find something this old,
all right, we're going Little John style. What on this?
That's right.
$6 to $10 a bottle for this finely crafted beer.
Indeed. Again, if you would find this at a classic beer bar in Belgium on a list, with several vintages of this available, this would be something you'd be expected to pay 60, 70 euros a bottle for.
Oh, that is fantastic.
Yeah. So this is quite a find, and I've been regaling people with
I feel like I'm not only drinking alcohol, but I'm embracing a life hack that I didn't know about.
I know from experience, for those of you who care about this sort of thing, I know this style of beer is fantastic with a very light brandade. You might want to make with a red meat, or you can go make it easy and classic. Just get a whole bunch of mussels, steam them up with onions, butter, and a little bit of this Gueuze at the bottom. It makes a fantastic combination. That sourness cutting through the brininess of the mussels.
Yeah, fantastic.
Beautifully, yeah.
I mean, you are clearly a gourmand, I will say. I mean, that is not only an expert. Okay, got it. I'm now looking at our friend Dave's bio, right? And it's just it's yeah. I mean, you're clearly an expert, right?
Well, that said, I'm not a chef, nor am I expert in Belgian cuisine, but I've had enough exposure.
Well,
Belgian cuisine in and of itself.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think that this would pair well with hot dogs?
Depends on the hot dog. Depends on the mood.
Oh, okay, all right. I mean, like I would say like let's go all like half beef, half pork. Sauerkraut, maybe a little bit of brown mustard.
Yeah, with the sauerkraut and mustard, definitely it's moving in that direction.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that's we're getting to a sweet spot.
Yep, that sour bouncing gets a sour makes perfect sense. And you know, and I wouldn't think you want that hot dog too spicy. You want to keep those not too peppery and all that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
All right,
very nice.
Cool. Well, since I got you here, Mike, just keeping it local, keeping it on the ground. What sour beers, if you don't mind, if you just come up this, I'm putting you on the spot. I apologize here, but what sour beers have you tasted here around the Hudson Valley that you think are exemplary? Because I know that's a tough one. It's a tough category to get right. And the few that I've had, mind you, I am a tough character to impress. I've never been too terribly impressed, with a couple of exceptions, but the one I like most was from across the border in Connecticut, so we won't even go there. But here in the Hudson Valley, which sour do you like best?
Got it. Well, I mean, here's the thing, Dave, right? Like, you are clearly a specialist, a domain expert, right, of exemplary nature, right? My approach to drinking is more on like a style level, a category level, right? And I think, like, for me, like, I like saisons, right? Like, I like sours. You know, they fit a certain context and drinking situation for me. There's no specific like supplier in the Hudson Valley that like screams out, right? But it is it's just really like a lovely note in like in the overall kind of song that it is my drinking experience.
Gotcha. You know, and you know, I'm someone who likes to drink for the season or the context of where it is he's drinking. And for me, sour beers, it's such a refreshing style. You know, it's kind of the thing I want to have on a hot summer day. It's not necessarily perfect for this cold winter evening here, but no
doubt.
So, gentlemen, if I could have you pound the remaining part of your Gueuze, because we got another step here.
Oh wow! Okay,
we're going to move into the fruity world. We're going to have a lambic from the same folks at Timmerman's. Please, this here is a Kriek or cherry version.
But now, Dave, I will say that my favorite kind of person is someone that likes to nerd out about the details, right? So, you know what? I love that I'm learning about this with you right now. And I would like to acknowledge that you might be just a beer nerd in a way that few people can appreciate. And I think we're here on this podcast today to celebrate all of your knowledge.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the commendation, but a small correction is due.
Oh, wow.
And that is
great.
If you're paid to do what you're nerding out about, you're no longer a nerd, you're a pro. So
well, listen.
Yeah.
Right now, here in this studio, right? Like you're not wearing a numbered jersey. You were wearing a beautiful green button-down shirt.
St. Patty's Day. Yeah, a couple weeks away.
There we go. I think next time around we need to see like a numbered jersey with Dave's name on it, and really kind of like get him to this pro level status. But we've changed the game on this next pour.
Yeah,
very fruity.
Again, a great summer drink. This was brewed in. It's actually, the date says March 6th. My gosh, we're almost right on the day. 2 more days away. But 2019. So this was brewed exactly, maybe bottled. I don't read Belgium. Anyways, it was brewed or bottled exactly 3 years ago today. Now, what's interesting is I know this beer when it's really fresh and young. And what happens is you get a lot of that because this is not made with fresh cherries, I know damn well it's made with syrups, but they're good syrups anyways. When they're young, you got you have a disparity on the palate. It's not integrated. Basically, what you got is the sweetness from the syrups that are used, plus the beeriness from the base young Gueuze that is used. But after 3 years in the bottle, what you have here is good melding of that. It's no longer obviously sweet. Sure, there's a bit in there, but it's not out of place. There is some harmony here, which again shows the capacity of these beers to improve with a little bit of age. And they're not even hoppy beers, and hops is a noted preservative, and these aren't terribly hoppy. These are low hop beers.
So, let's say it's the summertime in the Hudson Valley, right? I'm hanging out on the Bard campus, right? Maybe taking a dip in the waterfall there, right?
I know it.
Tell me, is this the perfect beer for that scenario?
It couldn't be. The most perfect it can be is if it's free. But again, whatever you're in for, that's the best beer.
That's great. What do you think the best situational or food pairing is for this beer?
Oh my gosh, we've talked about a fruit beer. It gets to be tough, because then you get a bit of sweetness there, meaning your food's should be on the slightly sweet side. A light fruit salad, an unsweetened fruit salad, fresh fruit. That's probably just fine.
Got it. And situational pairing?
Again, warm summer day in that creek at Bard College.
Oh, that's lovely. All right.
Or maybe a kayak. These are small bottles. These are less than 12-ounce bottles, but alcohol is on the low side. It's 4.4. There you go. Thanks, Mike. Cool. Well, we'll be doing beers again in subsequent episodes. Now, if you'd please be so kind as to take all these beers out to the folks in the Epicurean so everybody can take part and enjoy them.
Okay.
So if you can grab all these 3 bottles, I'll just hand it off to you. That'd be cool.
All right. No problem, Dave.
And I'm going to launch into wine now. Okay. Well, thanks to Mike and all the time we spent going into the sector that is the very narrow sector of beer that is Gueuze and Lambic beers of Belgium. And for those of you who made note of his looking at my bio, we'll get into that in the subsequent episodes. Yes, I spent some time working in high-level restaurants and all that, but that's for another time. Next up in the wine category is Cava. So, Cava, C-A-V-A. It's a sparkling wine. It's a denominated place of origin wine, or DO for short, from Spain. It can be white or it can be pink. If it's white, it's Blanco. If it's pink, it's Rosado. The main grapes that are used to make it are white grapes, known as Macabeo, Parellada, and Charolais. These are all indigenous grapes in Spain. Macabeo is also known in other parts of Spain as Viura, V-I-U-R-A. It's the number 1 white grape in Rioja, well-known red wine producing region. But here, these grapes that I've just mentioned, Macabeo, Parellada, and Charolais, are the primary grapes used for making this sparkling wine called Cava. And this style of wine is made the same way that all the best sparkling wines in the world are made, in a secondary fermentation, not dissimilar from the Gueuze and Lambic beers we were just talking about, also made in a secondary fermentation in the bottle. And it's also referred to as a traditional method, or sometimes known as champagne method, but now we're calling it traditional method for worldwide usage. And that name, Cava, can only be used to indicate Spanish wines that are made in that way in this specific denominated area. About 95% of all Cava wines are produced in the Penedès area of Catalonia in the northeast, though it's also produced in portions of other parts of Spain, in Aragon, Castilla y León, Extremadura, La Rioja, the Basque Country, Navarra, and Valencia. But honestly, almost every Cava you're going to find outside of Spain is going to be from the Catalonia region and from the Penedès area, just outside Barcelona. So if you ever get yourself to Barcelona, highly recommend a very short trip into Cava land. So this term Cava was officially adopted by Spanish winemakers back in 1970, officially, to distinguish their sparkling wines from that of Champagne, France, though it was in 1981 that Champagne's leading white grape, Chardonnay, was first used in the production of Cava, and then took off from there. So Chardonnay was unheard of in Spain overall, especially in making of Cava, until, well, these French got, or wine lovers got in their head that the French grapes were the best, and so everybody had to start planting French grapes, and 1980s was a big time for that, no less in parts of Spain. So besides Macabeo, Priorat, and Xarel-lo, Cava may also contain the aforementioned Chardonnay, also Pinot Noir, another grape from Burgundy, Champagne area, and the indigenous Suberat grapes. So there are different grapes that are allowed, but commonly, if not exclusively, Macabeo, Priorat, and Xarel-lo blends are used for making Cava. To make a rosé Cava, a sparkling pink Cava, blending is not allowed. What does that mean? Well, you can't mix a white wine and a red wine to make a pink. That's just not done. The best rosé wines are not done in a way you do not blend the white and the red. You basically have a slow, long pressing of the red grapes to bleed out enough red to make the wine pink. And this bleeding method, or known by the French term saignée, in Cava land can use the grapes Garnacha or Grenache, Pinot Noir, the indigenous Trepat or Monastrell to make the pink Cava. So it's produced in varying levels of sweetness. Undoubtedly, you're going to be most familiar with the brut style. These days you have brut nature, which is bone dry. That's become popular. But sometimes you'll see a slightly sweet one as well, and you rarely find the sweet ones here in the U.S. To be fair, you don't find them much in Spain these days. Dry cavas are immensely popular in many contexts in Spain, in people's homes, in bars, in restaurants, and in festivals. So we're going to now open up 3 different bottles, first here, and then it's going into the Epicurean to be enjoyed by lots of the folks in there. So we have 3 different ones that Matt and I are going to sample first. So the first one is called Vilarnau, and it is a rosé. As a matter of fact, we have 2 rosés today. Okay, well, I guess Valentine's Day just passed, and so I got saddled up with a whole lot of pink wine, so now to get rid of them. So let's see. Here's a geek note for you. Every wire cage that is used to close off every sparkling wine in the world is made with one thing that makes them all the same. So that is, when you twist these, each of them will have no more or fewer twists, half twists, than 6. So count it, Matt, as I do this. 6, there we go. That is a universal standard for the cages they're referred to. And here's the first one. Boom. Like the sound of that. Pour a little in my glass. And then a little in Matt's. All right. And yes, that is pink. So, cheers, salud. All right. So a little bit about Vilarnau. They were kind enough to provide me a PDF sheet that I can just kind of tell you a little bit about it. So here we go. This is made from Garnacha and Pinot Noir. So it's a blend of the French Pinot Noir and the Spanish Garnacha. Pinot Noir was planted way back in 1991, one of the first vineyards in Penedès to ever plant Pinot Noir, so it says. So they claim the folks at González Bias, the company who owns this winery and has their own importer here in the States, based in my native hometown of Chicago, has said that this is suitable for vegans. Well, guys, very few wines are not suitable for vegans. Almost everything is made in a vegan style throughout the wine world, so don't worry about that if you're a vegan. Let's see. This is so the Garnacha and the Pinot Noir were fermented separately in stainless steel tanks for 30 days, and then it was blended, and it was aged in the bottle for 15 months minimum, in contact with yeast to increase the concentration of flavors and aromas. And that is dry. Touch of, cranberry fresh, easy drinking wine. Commonly available in a very festive looking silk screen bottle. Definitely a wine for an event or a party. And this is labeled as a Reserva level, so that requires it to be aged. I believe it is a minimum of 15 months. All right. Well, recommended to be served with pizza, paella, or fideura. Fideura is a indigenous Catalan fine noodle dish. Unlikely you're going to find it much in the States, and maybe you can make your own. And I hate when they make recommendations, they say pasta dishes. Come on. Pasta dishes? Is it as if all pasta dishes are the same? Please. That ain't fair. Also pizza. Come on. Not all pizzas are created alike. I hate when the companies do that on their bottles of wine, especially. Maybe we should take Mike's cue and say, great with hot dogs. And actually, that rosé would be fine with a hot dog. I wouldn't recommend it with sauerkraut and mustard like Mike wanted to make his Gueuze go with, but I could see that with a hot dog with just a light touching of ketchup and maybe a touch of relish, who knows. But yeah, anyways. So last thing before we open the final bottle of Cava, we're opening 2 today, is that technical point, the producers of Cava in Catalonia, they pioneered a significant technological development in sparkling wine production with the invention of a device called the gyro pallet or the gyro pallet. It's a large mechanized device that replaces the riddling of bottles by hand, which and so this way the lees, the yeast, the dead yeast cells are consolidated in the neck of the bottle prior to its disgorgement and recorking. And so this technology, which was pioneered in Spain, is now applied to sparkling wine productions throughout the world. I've seen it in countless wineries in the United States, Canada, even Mexico recently when I was there, Germany, and even in Champagne itself. So the Spanish are great innovators in that regard, and they're great lovers of their own Cava wines. The next, which we're going to taste here, is definitely not a rosé. It is a Blanco, a white Cava, and the brand name is Roger Goulart, which sounds very French. That said, this is a Gran Reserva. And what does that mean? Well, it's made with the classic grapes of Charolais, Macabeo, and Parellada. And by the way, Charolais here is 60% of the blend, which is considerably a high amount of this particular grape. Of the grapes I've just mentioned, these traditional grapes, only Charolais, in my opinion, can also make some great still wines, table wines. And very little of that makes its way to the States, but it's coming to be a little bit of a thing in Spain, and hopefully we'll be hearing more about that in the coming years, because the producers there in Catalonia, in the Penedès area, are very keen on this grape, and when I visited there, I had some amazing examples with a couple of winemakers there of the still Charolais. So this particular bottle from Roger Goulart, it's Goulart, it's still very French. It's a vintage 2011. This is, it was bottled first in March 2012, again, 10 years ago, wow. And it's spent, minimum requirement aged in the cellar is 72 months. Clearly, it's been a lot longer than that. This is a 2011 vintage. And the Gran Reserva aspect of it, again, is only in reference to the amount of aging time. It doesn't, many people, they say reserve, they think, it's spent a lot of time in oak barrels. That's not the case when it comes to Cava wines. If wine spent any time in oak barrels, and it's not something that's very common, it's not the main point. The main point is the amount of age is a reflection of the level of whether it's a classic style, a Reserva style, or a Gran Reserva style. So in this case, let's go ahead and taste it. So, wow, very rich nose, a lot of kind of a bread-like character from all that yeast autolysis, the dead yeast cells here. There's nothing grapey about this. All that time in the bottle, everything's kind of come together. It's a really cohesive, focused wine. It's not screaming this fruit or that flavor aroma. It's really come together. This is a complex but rich, focused wine. Wow. Fun to drink. So, something that's worth mentioning is that in Cava land, they've just, after many years of work, have created a new system of quality. It's called the Cava de Guarda or Cava de Guarda Superior. And so the majority of the best Cavas you'll find now in the United States have certain aspects the wine has to adhere to in its production, meaning this Guarda label indicates the vineyard must be at least 10 years old from which the grapes are sourced, that the vineyard is grown 100% organically. They have a limit on the number of kilos that can be harvested per hectare, meaning it implies that lower yields make better wine. That's not always the case, but in this case, they're trying to impart that in the wine. And it will always have a vintage date. It won't necessarily be a non-vintage wine. It will be a vintage-dated wine. So the authorities and the individual producers in Spain have worked very hard to delineate for themselves this new integral elaboration stamp as well, that shows that these wines are made 100% by one producer from that producer's own estate as well. And these series of applications have taken a lot of time to be agreed upon and be implemented, and you, the consumer, are the ones to benefit. And another great thing about Cava as a category overall, it punches above its weight. It really does. No slam against some other great sparkling wine areas. I love me some champagne, but I can't afford those champagne prices all the time. And that said, there's amazing Cavas to be had at very inexpensive or medium-priced points. Yes, there are certain Cavas you can pay a lot for, but you don't have to. You can get a great bottle of Cava for a reasonable price. How much? Well, depends upon where you're buying it and who you're buying it from. But honestly, you can walk into a shop most anywhere here in the Hudson Valley and put down $20 to $30 and get a fantastic bottle of Cava. If you want to go lower, you can get a very good everyday one for $12 to $17 quite easily. So there you go. Right then, on to the spirit side of things. Well, what we're going to talk about with the spirits is something that very few people have come across, at least in this country. And it's something that I was only made aware of in a very kind of odd way. After I had moved here to the Hudson Valley, I went back to my previous home of Austin, Texas, and I was staying at a friend's winery there in the hill country just outside of Austin. And after enjoying a good evening with them, they said, "Hey, some fellas just opened up a distillery just down the road. You ought to go check it out." And I said, "Okay." Next morning, I called them up, and they said, "Yeah, sure, come on by." It was a 5-minute drive from my friend's winery, so it was easy to get to. And they're in the back roads of the hill country. And I discovered a drink that I had vaguely heard about once before, but had never had the chance to taste, called sotol, S-O-T-O-L. It's a drink that's from Mexico. It's a spirit from Mexico. It's known as the spirit, the state spirit of Chihuahua, Durango, and Coahuila. And since 2002, it's had an appellation of origin its own, just as Cava has an appellation of its own in Spain. And its origin there is relegated to these Mexican states, though the production of sotol also exists in the states of Sonora, Oaxaca, and the Texas Hill Country. Well, for ages, sotol has been just the regional vaquero drink in these Mexican states, while merely a popular stein of moonshine in West Texas. Basically, it was your uncle's, backyard hooch. And it's never really taken off in the United States until these fellas in Texas decided to make some. It's called Desert Door, and I wrote an article about it for a craft distillers magazine here. And I discovered that that the plant, it's an evergreen style of plant, meaning it's always keeps coming back. The Latin name is, excuse the pronunciation, Dazzlerian wheeleri, clearly named after somebody named Wheeler, of the family Asparagaceae, meaning it's from the asparagus family, nickname Desert Spoon. It typically grows on rocky slopes in the desert grassland in the Chihuahua Desert at 3,000 to 6,500 foot elevation. In the Chihuahua Desert, if you look at your maps, it's mostly in the northern part of Mexico, but it also bleeds over into parts of New Mexico, a wee bit of southeastern Arizona, and a good chunk of West Texas. So this plant is indigenous to this area. Texas has got its own variations. It's called Dazzlerian texanum, of course. It's related more to the edible asparagus than to agaves, and so it's less useful for distilling by comparison to the Wheelerai style or type. It typically grows, as I said, on rocky slopes, but unlike agave, which flowers only once in its lifetime, sotols produce a flower stalk every few years. So it's eminently more sustainable in many respects than agaves. So when wild harvested at about 12 to 15 years of age, the outer leaves of the sotol plant are removed to reveal the center core, which is then taken back to the distillery. That center core is where your fermentable sugars are concentrated. The core is then roasted and or steamed, shredded, fermented, and distilled, and that yields approximately 1 bottle of 80-proof sotol per plant. All right. So sotol's relative exclusivity to and accessibility within its native Mexico has helped prevent its increase in production volume and, to be fair, quality, as compared to its internationally recognized agave-extracted cousins of tequila and mezcal and raicilla. However, sotol is now beginning to achieve some international recognition, in some small part due to its being made outside of Austin, Texas, in the Hill Country. In addition, the most common brand you're going to find throughout the United States, mostly sold to the Mexican folks or folks of Mexican descent, is called Hacienda de Chihuahua, and it comes in kind of an ovoid tombstone-shaped bottle. Don't like that tip, but it's a fair example of a sotol. It's kind of like what Jose Cuervo is to tequila. Yeah, it's kind of like tequila, but it ain't great. That said, there are far better sotols out there, and one we're going to taste today with Matt, of course, and Martin, who's just come in. He's a whiskey fiend, as I discovered when first meeting him. He's got a great knowledge of that and a great love of it, and he's sticking his neck out here to taste something he's never tasted before. Martin, before you taste it, do you have any comments or questions before we go into it?
So the one we're drinking tonight is the one from Mexico, not the one from Hill County, Texas.
Correct. We are not tasting Desert Door. Desert Door, by the way, I've tasted over the last few years this development. These guys were just starting out when I stumbled upon them.
Yeah.
Their first batch was barely drinkable. The second batch was considerably better. The third one I tasted of theirs, they've gotten the hang of it. So anybody who get down to Austin, Desert Door, look for them. I know they're not widely sold, but I think they have landed a New York distributor in the last year or so. So if anybody knows where to find Desert Door here and around New York State, do let us know here at Radio Free Rhinecliff. But this we're tasting today is a newly imported one called Los Magos. And the folks at their U.S. importer were kind enough to send me a bottle complimentary, so I would be churlish not to give them a little puff here. No less than, as you all can see here in the studio, this bottle is nearly 3/4 gone, so...
You've made a healthy dent.
Yeah, clearly it doesn't suck.
Yeah.
So let's pour some. I'm going to hold off on any more comments. I'm going to allow Martin to weigh in.
I have to say, when you popped the cork there a few moments ago, I got a strong grassy whiff, which I thought, was interesting, if not necessarily appealing. But let's give it a sniff.
Well, very well. Just so you know, every sotol that I've tried, whether it's a micro style or the big one from Hacienda de Chihuahua, grassiness is a common characteristic of sotol. If you did not have a grassy character, you'd be wondering what have they done to this? What have they not put in here? What did they put in there that's not sotol? But this grassiness is indicative of what sotol should be going for. Yeah.
It's very smooth. I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting a bit more bite from the, was it 38%?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, but it's not. It's very, very smooth. I can't, I'm getting the grassy, but I'm not getting much else going on. It just tastes fine.
Yeah.
It's it reminds me of a gin almost.
Well, I tell you, they aged this in two different types of barrels. Barrels that once saw American whiskey and once that saw tequila. So they're used barrels, so you're not going to get a lot of oaky character out of them. But they are American white oak barrels that either held American whiskey or tequila at one time. That said, I think it kind of rounds out a bit of the grassiness. It could be even more intense that way if there were no barrel aging.
It's definitely like you could drink that neat, like, and just put it away. It's not a complicated drink. It's not something you have to like set yourself ready to drink, right? It's not like you kind of have to get in the headspace of I'm going to be drinking something that's going to have some alcohol in it. It does taste like something which is quite just easygoing, really.
Yeah, I find it very pleasant. There's no burn. It's well distilled. By the way, it is triple distilled according to the makers.
Does that reduce the burn? I don't know anything about making anything. So does that reduce the burn?
Well, if something is triple distilled, or should we say carefully distilled, you should not have a burning sensation.
Okay.
And this has none. This is a very classy. Whoever distilled this is a serious professional. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. I thought the burn was just an alcohol like percentage.
Not necessarily, no, because I could tell you, and many other, whiskey aficionados can tell you can have barrel-proof things. Things are clocking in at 57% by volume that are smooth as can be, and then there are others that the alcohol really stands out.
That's interesting, because I always attributed me not being burnt by whiskey with 57% being that I had drunk several whiskeys before I drunk that one.
Well, there's always the human factor to consider.
Yeah.
This, in my experience, this is one of the finest, if not the finest, sotol I've had. Then again, I haven't tasted everything there is out there, nor do I consider myself an expert when it comes to craft spirits of Mexico, though I'm halfway there, having done some research on Ricea and mezcal, and also having done a project for a tequila producer of note. But that said, I am far from being an expert. There are many, many people, both Americans and Mexicans, who are far more knowledgeable than I. I just think this is a really well-made product. I enjoy it. Sotol is not a drink for everyone, but if you're going to step into Sotol, I think the Los Magos is a great way to go. Very expertly made. Whether or not you like Sotol, you can't argue. This is it's a well-made spirit.
So is there, in the same way that there is like the mezcal, which has a much smokier character than tequila, on the whole, are there different varieties made from the same plant, or is Sotol the only one going?
Sotol, the style of Sotols that I've come across, nobody is smoking them the same way you'll find certain mezcals are smoking. Yeah. It's not done. Not to say that it couldn't be done. And there are barrel-aged versions. For example, the folks at Desert Door, I know, have aside from their standard Sotol, which is not oaky at all, they have one that they've left in oak barrels that they clearly are trying to draw out an oak character in it, and they've made it in smaller quantities, and they charge more money for it. It's not my preference, but apparently they do quite well with it.
You can imagine them like aging it like sherry or something like that to kind of bring out some interesting like stuff as well.
You could,
yeah,
could.
It's really nice. It sounds like it just feels like like the base ingredient to something else. Like it kind of tastes like a thing that could be built on top of. But you're looking at me blankly, and you're right too, because I have no idea what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Well, before we close out here, a little bit of history I should have brought in earlier. So the Chihuahuan indigenous people, they're called the Raramuri. They fermented sotol into a juice from sotol into a beer-like alcoholic beverage, just like pulque is the predecessor for tequila. It's agave. It's agave beer, basically. So there's a sotol beer-like alcoholic beverage that has been founded to have been produced as early as 800 years ago. And the 16th century, the Spanish conquistadors introduced European distillation, as they did throughout the Americas, and to produce a spirit from sotol, and that's a bit of history of sotol. For those of you, again, who are curious about it, there is sotol to be found here in the Hudson Valley. You could find it at various wines and spirits shops in the area. I don't know if you find much diversity, but you may find one or two brands out there.
You might also find it in my collection of spirits, I think, after this experience.
Well, there's
an endorsement.
There's an endorsement from Martin at the Epicurean. Thank you, Martin. That from a whiskey man.
Thank you so much.
Cool that. Well, everybody, that's been our first episode of Drinking on the Edge here at Radio Free Rhinecliff. I'm David Fuhr, your host into the world of adult beverages. Look forward to hearing from you, and you can hear from me next time here at Drinking on the Edge.